Hey guys, what's up? This is Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite movies, and today I'm going to finally be doing a movie review on a movie that I watched twice, and that is the new movie The Zone of Interest, written and directed by Jonathan Glazer. So yeah, my mouth is kind of broken. It's hurting right now, and I probably won't be able to speak properly. Another thing is I have finally finished making my short film, so that's really cool. Now I will have slightly more time to make YouTube videos, but even so, school is getting overwhelming, and there's a lot happening. But anyways, The Zone of Interest by Jonathan Glazer. Let's talk about it. This movie has caught my eye since Cannes Film Festival. Jonathan Glazer is someone who I've been pretty interested in, and the last film he's made is actually released 10 whole years ago, and it is the movie Under the Skin, released in 2013. A bold, dark, harrowing horror film that explores femininity and humanity in ways that not a single other filmmaker can. And it is definitely one of the earlier artsy horror films that A24 has ever distributed, and it really set the precedence for other filmmakers like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers to hop onto the A24 train. And aside from that, Jonathan Glazer is also a fantastic music video director. I mean, we have Karma Coma by Massive Attack, we have Karma Police and Street Spirit Fade Out from Radiohead, two absolutely classic music videos. And he also directed the iconic Virtual Insanity by Jamiroquai, which is also an instant classic. So obviously, Jonathan Glazer is a man with artistic vision. So 10 years later, he finally came out with another feature film. It premiered at Cannes Film Festival and won, I believe, the Grand Jury Prize. And so ever since then, I was really putting my eyes on this film. And by the end of 2023, near the end of December, actually right at the end of December, I think December 28th, I watched this film on a big screen in the cinema, and I nearly fell asleep. Now, I was really sleep deprived and stressed out during that period of time because if you are caught up with the detective lore, you would know that the first couple of weeks of returning to LA was extremely rough for me. Also, immediately after December 28th, on the 29th, I had to go to Mexico to solve a very complicated visa issue that I had. So I was really stressed out during the film, and I did not enjoy it at all. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it is a film that is definitely not boring in a bad way, but I just didn't get it. I just didn't quite understand it. So I told myself I'll have to rewatch it before I actually review it. So, The Zone of Interest is a film about a family that lives right beside the Auschwitz concentration camp during the Holocaust. And that's kind of the whole film. And that's it. It's adapted from a novel, which is about a love triangle between three fictional characters. But these characters are based off of real people, commandants of the Auschwitz concentration camp. But in this film, Jonathan Glazer took all the story away from the novel and just have the premise, and that's it. A family living peacefully beside a concentration camp. That's the entire film. And it's something. It's definitely something. So I finally rewatched it yesterday. It really took me a whole month to rewatch it. I also rewatched it with my friend at the same AMC at Century City. I don't know why AMC The Grove is not playing The Zone of Interest. That would have made everything way easier because yesterday I and my friend Michelle also went to The Grove together to check out the Criterion section in the Barnes & Noble. But anyways, I rewatched it and I can't say I enjoyed it more. And that's okay, because this movie is not meant to be enjoyed. The Holocaust is not something you can enjoy. But what it did do, however, is that the second time I watched it, it feels way less boring. Way less boring. I think it's because I'm beginning to see a structure in this film that I completely did not see in the first time. And also, this film hit me way harder. I was awake through the entire thing, and it was very intense, especially the last act. The last part of the film was particularly intense for me, and it's not intense as in relentless gore and violence. It's very much the opposite. It's a very empty film. It's intense on an intellectual level. It really makes you keep thinking and keep thinking and keep thinking and keep indulging in these ideas and these collective knowledge that the Holocaust happened. So the second time I watched it, the film definitely hit me way harder than it did before. And yeah, this isn't an anti-movie, by the way. There is no plot. There's not really a conflict. I mean, there is, but it's not really that important. There are characters that you can't root for. All the shots are just like, they're like surveillance camera shots. There are no close-ups, no mediums, they're all wides. And it's an anti-film. You're not supposed to enjoy this movie. And that's actually very important, because a lot of film critics have pointed out that if you make a movie about something as tragic and as horrible as the Holocaust, there's no way to depict it respectfully and have it be entertaining. Of course, there are a lot of great films about the Holocaust and about what happened in World War II, Schindler's List. But those movies are entertaining. And if there's entertainment in depicting something so horrific and tragic, it's almost like doing history a disgrace. It's almost like disrespectfully depicting history. It's so dark, it's so tragic, it's such a painful memory that you can't even depict it normally. So, yeah, Jonathan Glazer took that and basically decided to make the least entertaining Holocaust film ever, because it is the only way you can respectfully portray it. And it's not even, well, if I can't make it entertaining, then I'll make it boring. Yeah, it's boring, but it's not boring in the sense that Jonathan Glazer did nothing to the film. There is still great cinematography, great music, a looming sense of dread. The framing is very haunting, and the entire structure of the film is filled with intent. So, another thing I did yesterday morning and also 2 nights ago is that I watched Shoah, the definitive 9.5 hour long documentary about the Holocaust. And I watched it to, get in the mood. But what's amazing about Shoah is that it didn't use a single piece of footage from the Holocaust or any footage from the concentration camps, and everything is left up to imagination. And again, the zone of interest is similar to that. This is so horrific that by showing it, you actually make it less horrific. You need to leave it up for the audience to figure it out. It's a constant battle between what you see versus what you know. And that's why it's so intellectually challenging. And Jonathan Glazer himself said it best: this movie is two stories. The image tells one, the audio tells another. Especially the parts where we see the family living beside the concentration camp. Apparently the sound designer of this movie created an entire sound library of what it probably sounds like to live right beside the concentration camp. And throughout the entire film, you hear nothing but screams, crying, gunshots, incinerators, smoke coming out, trucks. You hear people. It's horrifying, and it keeps happening. It's looming in the back constantly. And yeah, it's horrifying, but also at the same time you grow numb to it, but that's part of the experience, because these characters living beside the camp, they have grown numb to it. They are completely oblivious that right on the outside of the walls, it's people getting gassed, people dying, and they're just completely oblivious of what's going on. And The zone of interest starts off with a black screen, kind of reminds me of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it just starts off with this drony string piece that just envelops you into the world, and it hits me even harder after watching a string of poppy, highly stylized, very mainstream movie trailers. A black screen that feels super empty and dreary is like a gut punch. Then we have I can separate this movie into 6 parts. Parts 1 to 3 are essentially the family parts. And this is what you would call a surveillance camera film, because that's actually how they filmed it. They placed like 10 cameras around the house, and they just let the actors do their own thing. It's almost like an artistic experiment. Not almost, it straight up is an artistic experiment. Part 1 shows the normal life of the family living beside the concentration camp, and then it fades to white. Part 2, we see Rudolf Höss's mother, I believe it's his mother or his mother-in-law, visiting the house, and then it fades to red. Part 3 is where we have a pool party, and then Rudolf Höss tells his wife that he is transferring to a different place called Oranienburg. So this is the 3 parts of the film. The first 3 parts also takes up the first half of the film. It's very slow paced, but on a second watch, I was able to pick up so many subtleties that is actually disgusting. Like near the beginning of the film, where the family receives a bunch of free clothes, and Rudolf Höss's wife sort of puts herself in a nice coat. I believe those dresses and those coats belong to dead Jewish prisoners, and they're just wearing it. And then a little bit later, the older brother were playing with golden teeth on his bed. Again, who do you think those teeth belong to? One particularly disgusting scene is the scene where Rudolf Höss and his 2 sons are playing in the river, and you can see a rush of ashes rushing down, and a piece of bone hits Rudolf Höss' legs. And that was tragic and gross and sad. And Rudolf Höss was freaking out, like, get out of the river now. And they had a really intense shower and cleaned everything up. But you're the reason that this is happening, by the way. You're part of the problem. And that part is almost aggravating for me, because he's scared of ashes, of the dead people that he killed. He did this to himself. It's so ignorant and oblivious and so frustrating. And Jonathan Glazer also keeps using the same angle and the same framing over and over again to show changes in the house, in different parts of the house. The framing is usually really nice. Whenever we see the garden, a small section above, you can see what happens outside of the wall, and you can see a watchtower, and you can see smoke coming out of incinerators. It's like no matter how peaceful their lives are, they're always living under a cloud of smoke coming from the concentration camp. And yeah, there's even one point where Rudolph's wife was like, oh yeah, he calls me the Queen of Auschwitz, as if that's a good thing. That's not a good thing. It's aggravating how oblivious these people are, and it really shows the banality of evil. They're doing evil and they don't even realize it, because they've grown so numb towards it, because they have been so misled and miseducated that they don't even know that they've been brainwashed. So now we enter part 4, which is the Polish girl sequence, or the Sunbeam sequence, and it's easily the best part. And it's kind of funny because the first time I watched the film, I almost fell asleep in the middle. This is the part I missed out, and this is easily the best part, where we suddenly cut to this infrared black and white sequence where we have a little girl planting apples around and finding a musical note sheet in an empty canister. And he takes that note sheet, rushes back home, and in the next morning played it on the piano. And the infrared sequences is such an interesting visual because you see the girl being shrouded in complete darkness. The world around her has completely taken the light and the joy out of everything, and it's just pure darkness. But also, the piano piece is almost like cinema's only way to face such a horror. It's so tragic. These events are so painful to think about that the only way you can depict it is through a piece of music that some random person left behind. And that person is probably dead, and you don't even know who it was made by. And it's actually very tragic and damaging to think about. Part 5 of the film returns to the house beside the camp, and we essentially see life in that house without Rudolf Höss. And it's the slowest and simplest part, but one part that stands out is the audio bit where we hear a German soldier trying to drown a Jewish person for fighting over an apple. And again, that was disturbing. Part 6 is the ending of the film. Rudolf Höss arrives at Oranienburg, and we have one boring meeting after another after another. And I feel like that's another idea that Jonathan Glazer was sort of toying with, and that is these meetings are boring. And these meetings feel like everyday business. They feel like a regular Tuesday. But what they're talking about in those meetings is invading Hungary and killing Jewish people there. And again, it's disturbing how to them it's just like a regular Tuesday. But what they're doing is war crime. And then at the very end, we sort of randomly jump to the future, an abrupt cut to the future. And this part is probably the most haunting for me. It's almost like a gut punch, where we suddenly go to the Auschwitz concentration camp in present day, and we see cleaners just cleaning up the gas chamber, cleaning up the incinerators, wiping the glass wall behind a gigantic pile of shoes. And again, to them, it's also just a regular Tuesday. But this time, they're trying to keep history intact by preserving this museum, of course. And seeing that pile of shoes sends chills to my spine. And then it cuts back to Rudolf Höss standing in the middle of the corridor, just shrouded by emptiness and nothingness, and he just continues going downstairs. It's so empty, and yet it's real. And I guess cinematically, this is the best way to portray something this dark and this horrible. And the score by Mikachu is amazing. Apparently, they made an entire score, but Jonathan Glazer only ended up using like small bits of it for the opening sequence, for the ending sequence, for some moments here and there. But they're all harrowing, drony, dark. The ascending strings at the end sound like screams. It's horrifying. And yeah, overall, the film is very artistically challenging, but I also feel like this is one of the most important films of 2023. I think the way it depicts history is very rare, but also it's something that makes you think. So yeah, it's not an enjoyable film. It's not meant to be enjoyable, and Jonathan Glazer keeps it that way. It's a harrowing film and might be the most artistically impressive of 2023. I am feeling a decent 9 out of 10 for The Zone of Interest. So, have you seen The Zone of Interest? Comments below, let me know. Subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching.